you're anything like me, you've been looking forward to the Five Nights at Freddy's movie that was supposed to come out sometime in 2016 or 2017. We got an announcement in 2015 that Gil Kenan would be directing the movie. He was known for things like the Poltergeist remake and even one of my favorite childhood movies, Monster House. Alongside him in the Thunderdome of creation was Tyler Burton Smith, known for writing the cult classic Chucky movie Child's Play. Though instead of receiving the movie or even a trailer, we got a post on Scott Cawthon's official Steam page. In the post, Scott stated that partially due to problems within the movie industry as a whole, the film was met with several delays and roadblocks, and that it was back to square one. Though in the end of the post, he promised to be involved with the movie from day one this time, also stating, "That's something that is extremely important to me. I want this movie to be something that I'm excited for, and I'm excited for the fan base to see." Now, a lot of people have questions about this movie, mainly being the release date, who's working on it now, and what's going on with the movie as a whole, when did filming start, all this other stuff. To me, the one thing that I was mainly concerned about was, where's the movie going to take place? When's it going to take place, and what is it going to be about? I've always wondered if it would be about Michael, or if it would be about Springtrap or William, or something to do with the story, or maybe it would just be a fun little thing where, some kids break into a place and find these haunted animatronics. But luckily for us, there's actually info on that. It might come as a surprise to many that there is actually a list of screenplays that Scott uploaded to Reddit with his November 2020 post about the film. The post read, "Hi everyone. Before we get to bad news considering the state of the Five Nights at Freddy's movie, I wanted to share a brief history of the Fnaf screenplay. It's been a long road, so let's take a look at some of the screenplays and how far they've come and gone over the years. In no particular order, some of these came from big studios, from big directors, and some from me, and some from other hired writers. I gave the screenplays a name, and I'll include a brief synopsis, as well as what ultimately led to each screenplay being rejected. Although I had assumed that this post would have my answers and what I was looking for, ultimately it just turned out to be a bunch of scrap screenplays. I'll read them now so you can get an idea of what the movies would be like. Though remember, all of these were cancelled and scrapped, either because Scott himself didn't like them or the studio assumed that it would be really bad as well. If you would like to skip to the more official news, please skip to the timestamp on screen. For now, however, let's commence the list. The F screenplay. Basic setup. Group of teenage troublemakers break into Freddy's, and chaos ensues. Problems. Although a pretty basic setup, there were a lot of odd choices here, which only got weirder as the story continued. The story ended with our protagonists in a secret underground animatronic facility that was designing robots for the government. Verdict. What the f***? Strayed way too far from the source material. Tossed. The Plushies Take Manhattan screenplay. Basic setup. Plushies Take Manhattan. Problems. Plushies Take Manhattan. Verdict. Burned with fire. The Random Charlie screenplay. Basic setup. Charlie and friends sneak into Freddy's after hours to retrieve a lost toy. Problems. Although sharing names of familiar characters from the series, these characters had nothing to do with their game and book counterparts. So while featuring similar elements of the games, it seemed too loosely based on the game and lost a lot of its impact because of it. Verdict. Felt like a random bag of Fnaf elements with no real stakes. Meh. The Silver Eyes screenplays. Basic setup. Kira and I both worked on 3 versions of the Silver Eyes screenplay over the course of about a year, trying to find the right approach to the story from the first book. Problems. These were the first attempts I made myself to write a screenplay, and after realizing it was going to be difficult, I had to find someone else who understood the lore well enough to do it. Unfortunately, it also meant these screenplays suffered greatly from my inexperience at writing. Even Kira, with her writing expertise, couldn't save them. Verdict. Although these had some good elements, I ultimately decided to focus on making a screenplay from the games and not from the books. The Pawn Shop screenplay. Basic setup. A kid who watches after a pawn shop finds trouble when an animatronic is brought in. It turns out Freddy's had been robbed, and the animatronics were taken to different locations for sale. The other animatronics had come to retrieve the one at the pawn shop, and the kid and his friends got roped into an adventure. Problems. A creative approach, though it felt more like a boy and his animatronic, and too much like an after-school adventure. Not enough horror. Verdict. Seemed like a good idea at the time. Quick side tangent here, not in the script at all. This post was made before the game Security Breach, and in my opinion, Security Breach is the closest we're ever going to get to a FNAF story like this. Something where a person is friends with a robot rather than against it. This really did seem like it could have been maybe the idea for Security Breach, as these were things that have been tossed around since 2016, 2017. Maybe this somehow got put into that game, implemented. I don't know. That's a side tangent. There's no proof of that. I was just thinking out loud. The Cassidy screenplay. Basic setup. Diving deep. The screenplay packed in a lot of lore, following the story of Cassidy. Problems. Spanning multiple time periods, following multiple characters, and featuring lore from multiple games. It was pretty saturated. Saturated to a fault. And it may have been satisfying to the most hardcore fans, but it would have left a majority of people confused and lost. Hey, wait. Maybe this was the most accurate screenplay. Verdict. Ultimately more of a visual encyclopedia than a movie. This was not satisfying to me. Out. The Misfit Kid screenplay. Basic setup. A single mom brings her kid to a new town. Kid finds Freddy's. Hilarity ensues. Problems. One of the problems in creating a modern-day story with an old Freddy setting is finding a way to connect the protagonist to the restaurant, finding a reason for them to be there, and finding a reason for them to stay. The problem is that for this reason, the kid had to go to Freddy's and had misadventures. It was too contrived, too forced. Verdict. Not a bad setup, but it just didn't work. If I don't care about the characters, then there's a good chance no one will either. Pass. This was going to be the screenplay for a while because it didn't have any serious flaws. I ultimately just decided it wasn't good enough though. The Ghost Tracker screenplay. Basic setup. A group of amateur ghost trackers sneak into an abandoned Freddy's. Problems. Although a very common sense setup for this sort of movie, the problem again arose as to how to give these characters a connection to Freddy's itself. What ended up happening was too much of the story went back to their own backstories and their own hardships, and it took the spotlight away from the story of Freddy's. Verdict. A stronger connection between the protagonist and Freddy's was needed. Lesson learned. Now, a fun fact about this for anyone who doesn't follow Five Nights at Freddy's that closely, we did actually partially get to see something like this. The Fnaf Plus trailer, a remake of Five Nights at Freddy's 1 that is backed by the Fnaf initiative, is actually taking this kind of approach for one of the game's storylines. There was a whole video about a kid breaking into a Fnaf location and finding a bunch of stuff there. He called himself a paranormal investigator, and he actually ended up getting attacked. Now, it was later stated that the kid in the thing did not die. He actually did get trapped. You can go watch it. I'll put it in the description. Though, it's interesting to see that we did actually see this chased down by a person who is loosely connected to Scott. So that was very interesting to me, and let's get back to them. The Insane screenplay. Basic setup. Another Ghost Tracker variation. This one involved the Funtime animatronics, underground ball pit tunnels, and a marionette out for revenge. Problems. As some of the other screenplays ventured too far into adventure, this one went way too far into action. Verdict. All over the place. Too many characters doing too many things. And last but not least, the Mike screenplay. Basic setup. This makes sense. Why didn't I think of this before? Problems. Hey, actually this is a good mix. It has all the best pieces from all the previous screenplays. Not really any problems here. All the right characters, all the right motivations, all the right stakes. Verdicts. Yeah, we're going with this one. It's fun, it's scary, and it has a great central story. After listing all these screenplays, Scott moved on to the bad news, originally talked about in the title of the post, stating, "Oh right, so on to the bad news. The bad news is that there won't be any more screenplays to add to this list, since we're officially making the Mike screenplay. Filming starts in spring." Smiley face. Well, this is great news. The movie is going to be about Mike doing the night guard shift. We will get a movie about Michael Afton and the work he does to free the kids' spirits, and this was scrapped too. Jason Blum stated in an article, "We've written multiple scripts, and we've got to where we're threading a needle, which is doing justice to Five Nights at Freddy's and making Scott happy. The only way that we can go about this is giving it to Scott. I don't want to do something that Scott doesn't like. Let me state this in a different way. I don't have the right to do something that Scott doesn't like. Basically, Scott has the kind of equivalent say of the final cut as I do, and it's taken longer than I hoped to get the story right. So I'm making this video not to say that I have some sort of insider information or say I know what the movie is going to be about. I make the video to ask, what will it be about? After all these screenplays I listed, and even the most basic one that fans would assume that it's going to be, how is it that we still don't have a story down pat? Down pat, not Matt Pat. To me, it just made the most sense to have the story be about Michael, though some of the other ones could work too. A movie based off the novel would have been awesome, though unfortunately I'm not so sure it would get the mainline audience's attention. If anything, I would like to see the movie focus on Michael, with him doing a week of the night guard shift, trying to burn down the original FNAF 1 location to free the kids' souls that his father had trapped in the suits. During this, you could even have flashbacks and Michael piecing together the kind of man that his father was. Even in the end, you could have the camera cut to a closed-off room, revealing Springtrap and setting up for sequels. Though this seems like the smartest idea, I guess that's not what they're going for, and we just have to wait and see. I ask now in the comments, tell me what would you like to see the movie be about, or what you think the movie could be about. I'd love to hear what you have to say. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.